Now, our next speaker is Michael Farley, and he's talking about Mayan women's voices on transitional justice in Guatemala. You're welcome to the stage, Michael Farley.
Thanks for having me, Mike. So I'm here to talk about my partner Juliette's PhD research, which is really about amplifying the voices of a group of courageous and resilient indigenous Mayan women from the Quechua-speaking region of Guatemala, shown in green there. Guatemala is a small republic in Central America that experienced a 36-year civil war starting in 1960, a few years after a US-backed military coup. And it was a war between the military dictatorship and an insurgent guerrilla movement. The war ended in 1996 with internationally brokered peace accords, and there was hopes then that Guatemala could turn a page, become a democratic society, reform its constitution. There were some constitutional amendments, but there was also a move to have justice and accountability for the war. There were reports by the United Nations and the Catholic Church that showed that over 200,000 people died in the war, that atrocities took place, including genocide, almost all done by the military dictatorship during the time. And this is where Juliette got involved with the move for justice and accountability. She worked in 2004 as an accompanier to witnesses in the Rios Montt genocide trial, which only came to fruition 10 years later. But back to the women that we're going to talk about. They were from a community called Sepur Zarco, where there had been a lot of land disputes. And in 1982, this led to the military opening a barracks, a garrison in the community. This shows what happened there, the atrocities that were committed by the army. They murdered the husbands of these women. The women were then forced to work in the garrison, in the barracks. They were as cleaning and other domestic chores, but also they were systematically raped. And this shows their quest for justice. This is their end goal of getting, well, one aspect of justice, which is legal justice. But it was a long road. Along the way, these events happened in '82, but it took till 2010 before it was publicly known to the wider society. A tribunal of conscience was a public hearing where the evidence was presented about what had happened. And 6 years later, we got the final trial, a proper legal trial, in Guatemala City, Supreme Court of Justice. This was the first instance of a case of wartime domestic and sexual slavery being prosecuted by a national court in the country where the crimes had been committed. And to do this, they needed the support of a group of non-governmental organisations that formed the Alliance to Break the Silence. And this is how they got to where they are. So you can see that the survivors of Sepur Zarco, the women there, with their interpreter, because they didn't speak Spanish, they spoke Quechua, the Mayan language, in front of the prosecution team, who presented, I would say, really a very strong case. It did involve video testimony that was from witnesses in the trial. This testimony was taken in an earlier hearing in the legal process. And normally, Guatemalan justice system is a bit of a joke, to be honest. Normally doesn't have a very high level of jurisprudence or testimony, but here there was a very high level of evidence provided by the prosecution. Here you see boxes of evidence. They also had incredibly detailed forensic evidence proving the murders had taken place, and the expert witness from as far away as Argentina. Here, an example of the people observing the trial: Guatemala's own Nobel Peace Prize laureate Rigoberta Menchú, an indigenous woman herself. Next to her, Jody Williams, Nobel Prize winner from the United States. Just as important that Guatemalan civil society could observe the trial, especially the younger generation, to know what had happened in the not too distant past, for the historical memory to understand where we are now, and especially because of the disinformation campaign by the defence supporters. You can see Juliette just over Rigoberta Menchú's shoulder. Juliette attended every day of the trial, and she also worked closely with one of the organisations that helped the women, the National Organization of Guatemalan Women. At the end of the trial, the guilty verdict came down. The two defendants, there were more perpetrators, but two defendants were found guilty. The women acknowledged the verdict here, and reparations were ordered as part of the sentence. This is another part of the banner with women saying what the reparations they wanted: monuments, some basic amenities in their community, incredibly poor community, like healthcare, education, recreation. And above all, part of their justice was to be heard, to be believed. This was very important, the fact they were being heard. They believed they wanted their community to know, they wanted Guatemala to know, and they wanted the world to know. So Juliette played a part in that. Here she is with them, and they're interpreted in the court at the end of the trial. And so she promised that she would do that, but tragically Juliette herself died 3 years ago. And that's why I'm on stage today, not her. And I am really speaking on behalf of them, keeping Juliette's promise. So on behalf of Juliette, and on behalf of the incredibly courageous, resilient survivor women of Sepur Zarco, thank you for listening.